There's absolutely not a musical component to this session, and that really is quite by on purpose, because to me there's something that has to be different from any musical organization at school, and to me that difference is Christ, and by extension love, and relationships and those kinds of things. So we're going to talk a little bit about that in the context of that today, and I'm interested to hear. Interested to hear stories from you, how this kind of thing plays out, and you know, perhaps even ministry opportunities that you've had because of relationships with kids and folks. And so anyway, that's what we're going to talk about a little bit this afternoon: spreading the love, loving God. Well, that's really kind of basic, but it's foundational. We have to teach our kids to love God. And I have an anthem that I love to do, and I try to make sure that every kid that comes through my choir gets a chance to sing it. And that's "To Love Our God" by Mark Hayes, and text by John Parker. Because from that anthem I can teach them about the primacy of loving God. The reason we were made is to love our God. Talk about those things, and you know, we want musical excellence. We've talked about wanting musical excellence. That's something we strive for, and the reasons why we strive for that. But we must, in what we do, I must teach them to love God. And I can do that by example. I can do that by encouraging them through word. But it's just so important that it starts there, because everything else radiates out from it. Loving students. It has been said and mentioned in passing and on purpose that you have to love students to have a youth choir. Period. Listen, teenagers are smart. We all know that. They're a lot smarter than they let on sometimes. And they're smart in ways that we often don't give them credit for. They can see through a phony in 10 seconds. I've seen it. I've watched them do it. And if you don't love them, they'll know. And if they don't think you love them, they won't come back. They might stick it out for a while to finish things off or something like that, but if they ever sense that you don't love them, you're gonna fail. So that's key. And how do we love them? Well, you love them through who you are. It's so important that you not try to be someone else. I get tickled. I may have mentioned this to someone else earlier, but you know, I'm amused by folks who have to be cool, to think they have to be cool to work with teenagers, and so they'll dress a certain way, and they'll talk a certain way, and they'll act a certain way. And really, what teenagers want is you, genuinely you, and that's all they want. In fact, they really don't even care whenever you point your finger at them and say, "You straighten up and act right, because we're here to work." If you love them. Otherwise, that's just punitive. But if you love them, they'll listen to you, and they might, yeah, you've got to love students, and that is so key, and that's key in recruiting. And how that's key in recruiting is, some of those kids will go that you talk to about coming to choir. They'll go to the other choir members and say, "So, tell me what's choir like? Oh man, he works our tails off, and all that stuff, and why do you go?" "Because we have a great time." Or they'll say, is he a jerk? Sometimes when he needs to be. honest with their friends, and they'll be honest, and if you love them, somehow those in their juvenile way of expressing it, they'll let the others know, yeah, he loves us. Loving adults. This can be a little more challenging, especially if you have an audition group, and maybe later we can talk about how you go about auditioning a group. That would be the best way to protect your backside. There are some things that you can do to help that process, but you've got to love adults too, their parents, but more specifically the adults that you're working with. It's really important to have a team of folks that you can depend on, and sometimes you get people that can be the heavy for you. I mean, I've had a couple of ladies that could do that. I mean, that was their gift. They didn't want me to have to be the real heavy at times, and so they graciously walk behind me and take care of things and make things happen that, could sort of jeopardize my standing with kids. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. We're not talking about major things, but hey, your shorts are too short.
Yeah.
Take care of that. I don't have to mess with that stuff. But those are the things. I mean, you gotta love those folks. And students loving you. This may be a little harder, and it was hard for me at first. You have to let them love you too. And what that means is sometimes you're going to have to be uncomfortable to allow them to do that. Sometimes their expressions of love for you are not sophisticated and maybe even close to not appropriate at times. It just depends. But you have to be willing to let them love you. And that is really a key thing. And you have to let your adults love you. And the thing I find there, I've got one guy in choir who's been coming and helping since day one. His oldest daughter is a teacher now, married, came through choir. His youngest daughter is a Baylor student, and she's to be a senior this year. And he has no more kids. He comes every Sunday and helps. And so, and he does that because he loves me and he loves those kids. And he wants to help me. And every once in a while, I have to give him something to do. He'll ask me about something, and I'm thinking, I got that covered. No, Tori, would you do this? And he loves me. He's my friend, and he loves our kids. And you got to let them love you too, the adults. I know that sounds a little strange. I mean, it does, but some of us can be a little guarded that way, and so it requires us to have an openness that may make some of us uncomfortable. I've gotten used to it. In fact, I've gotten where I enjoy it, and I cherish those times when those kids come up to me and express love. And last night at McAllister's, 3 of my senior girls, whom I just adore, were there, and we realized that was it. Last night was our last time. That was the last time they were going to sign a song with the youth choir. That was the last time they were going to sing, and I just walked up to them and gave them a big hug and told them I love them. And yeah, that's worth it. Come on, loving the others. I think it's very important that teenagers be given the opportunity to look past stereotypes that they have and have opportunity to love the others that are the poor, are the ones that Jesus told us to love. That's what I mean. The orphans, the widows, the poor, the infirm, and that they be given opportunity to do that. It's amazing what they can and will do if given the opportunity. And sometimes a gentle nudge that pushes them to do it out of their comfort zone. I don't know how it happened, and I mean, we may talk a little bit more about this later in the area of traditions, but a tradition started, and I don't know, I can't remember when. It was probably 10, 12 years ago, maybe longer ago than that, but at First Baptist Picayune, Mississippi, one of the things I always did, and you may have noticed an awkward moment last night when the kids moved and then Randall got back up to speak. Well, the kids were doing what I told them to do. Somewhere along the way, I told them, I said, go make some friends. And when the concert was over. And then I did that a couple of times, and then one on concert, one of the kids says, go make some friends. And it just stuck, and that's what we do. The kids expect that. They want that. They desire that. So when we finish a concert, and it's all said and done, they're waiting on me. They want to hear it from me. Go make some friends. And they go into the audience wherever they are. And if it's a senior adult in a wheelchair, they'll kneel down by him, talk to him. And I tell them, touch them. Put a hand on them. They need touch. They're not getting it from someone like you. They need that. And it's interesting to watch them do that when we first, and the younger kids who go, and then they watch the older kids, and they do that. Teaching them to love the others, going to gospel rescue missions where people smell, and where people are unlovely, and where people, sometimes, some cases, are unwelcoming. To give them the opportunity to be confronted with that is vitally important. And what I found that often in those cases, we find much more in common than there is difference. That's my experience. Just another thing, and some learning things that go along with this, and we'll get on and open up some dialogue here in a minute. A couple of years ago, we were at the either Union Rescue or Central Rescue Mission, or maybe it's the Memphis Rescue Mission in Memphis, Tennessee. And we had done a concert, and I tell you what, the guys at the Gospel Rescue Mission are often the most appreciative audience that we sing for, and vocal, and just enjoy the kids. But one of the men who was kind of a trustee at the rescue mission said, can I talk to your kids? And he'd been working with me about the concert, and so I said, sure. And so the kids sat down, and all the men were still there in the mission, and he said, men, how many of you grew up in church? And about 80 or 90% of the hands in that room went up. And he said, children, look around you. And kids looked, saw all those hands, and then he said, shortest sermon I ever heard, one of the best I've ever heard. He said, children, those men and me are you one or two bad decisions down the road. Don't you ever forget. I could never have told them that, like that happened, and loving the others was an opportunity for those kids to hear that. So, that's important. Thoughts and questions? that's short and sweet, but this is a topic that I think is very important. Um, because music for music's sake is okay. I mean, I love music, and I love to hear music done well, and very eclectic in taste and all that stuff. But that's not what music was created for. And it's got to be more than just music. And love is the key factor. Yes, ma'am.
What are some things that you do to build community within your group? Like when at the beginning of the year, say for instance.
Well, I don't have to work too hard at that because our kids are together all the time. They do youth stuff together. So, I mean, I don't have to work too hard at that. Now, I would work a little harder at it if I had more kids outside the church who sang in choir and weren't necessarily involved in choir. But I think that just having them together is one of the best ways to build community. I think we can work at it really hard. But with teenagers, at least in my experience, is when if they're given the opportunity to be together, the community can take place. Now, what I have found is this, that you might have to remove some barriers to that. You may have to deal with some issues that keep community from happening. Like conflict, or some kids who might have conflict with one another, and at times you'll have to deal with that. But I think if all things are pretty good, I think community kind of happens with them. They just like being together. At least my kids do.
That's really interesting because I don't find that always to be the case with all of my kids. And I'm just an interim. I've been pianist here forever, but we had an instrument music retired first, so I've been interim for 2 years. They're in the youth group together, but they're not necessarily community. I mean, they're there, and they're in the same room, but they're not really community. Do they really care that much about each other? It's obvious that sometimes the older ones could really care less about the 7th and 8th graders. Am I different? I mean, because it seems to be kind of a given that happens, and I just.
Well, that may be a little bit of a stretch. The thing is, and we've talked about student ministers and ministers of music working together, and I mentioned earlier at lunch, how fortunately I have had student ministers that have been supportive, and we're looking for a new one for our downtown campus right now, which is where I actually serve now, and so there's a conversation coming. Once I know this person by name, because we're going to talk about that up front. I'm expecting you to support our youth choir. But if there's conflict, I can see definitely where that is a problem. I've been fortunate there in that. Yeah, Randy?
One of the things I do in rehearsal, because I like having variety, I get bored too. So sometimes after we've stood to sing something, I'll say, before you sit down, I want you to talk to another student that's at least 2 years separate from you. So that means seniors have to go down, and we have a junior high choir and a separate high school choir, so the 9th graders would have to go up and just ask them, what's the weirdest thing that happened to you this week? And so just suddenly, then there's all these little conversations going on. Then they'll sit down and say, someone tell me about what someone else told you. So they'll say, well, right over there she had this car came running into the side, or whatever. I mean, they'll tell the and it immediately starts connecting across age, because at our church, all of our grades are together all the time. So the 9th grade Sunday school department doesn't have anything to do with the 10th grade Sunday school department, etc. And so choir is the place that they can come across those lines, and so that's why I try to do that. So I'm always trying to come up with something to get them to, connect, even in the middle of a rehearsal for just a minute, and then
I'm sure I'm gonna deal with that a little more, uh, as we grow. Um, and I think I mentioned earlier, we have a new pastor, who's been here, been in the church since March. And so having been through an interim and been through some other weirdness at church, which I won't go into, but just we're approaching healthy and have not been there for a while. And so I'm going to have to deal with that, I'm sure, as more, especially as new families and kids come in, then it's catch-up time. You know, catch up to the kids that have been in the group all along, and you think, I'm new, how, you know, and that's always a good question. How do you assimilate new kids, Randy?
Um, I try to, some of the same things that we're doing, but also try to, if I can find out something about them, that they play something weird, or that they made All-State back in North Carolina when they lived there, and they just moved here, or um, just, sometimes I'll just have them, what I try to do is to not have the new kids stand up and talk about themselves, but to have one of the established kids find out something about them, and then they tell about this person that's just moved here from North Carolina. Because we have a lot of people that move in because
Right.
it's Houston, and so we're often having people that are reluctant. They were perfectly fine where they were, and then their dad got transferred. So you know, we need to do some things to kind of build some.
We do a retreat once a year, and oddly enough, I found that Martin Luther King Day is the best time for us to do that. They're all out of school on that Monday, and so we come for rehearsal on Sunday evening like we normally do, and then we play. We spend the evening playing. Sometimes we have spent the night and tried to rehearse the next day. That's not always the best thing, but we play, and then the next day we meet at 9 o'clock and we'll rehearse to noon, and kind of get a leg up on stuff for things specifically as it relates to preparing for choir tour and for the literature for the spring and things like that. And that's fun. Sometimes we'll go off and do that in a retreat setting. Sometimes we just do that and go to our rec center at the church and just play and do all kinds of games. And you know, especially community, that's one of the places where we build community is when we play together and, you know, play Noah's Ark and, you know, those silly games where everybody has to run around and swat at each other and do things that are just, you know, just fun. But that's how we do our retreat. I find that in the fall it's just too busy to do that because of football schedules, kids who play in the band. You know, I've got one of those, and you know, I mean, they're going from August 1st. In fact, Jonathan starts band camp Monday, August 1st. And so our summer's over then, but that's a good thing. Other thoughts, questions, ideas? Yes, sir.
How do you facilitate mentoring and kind of on a counselor basis is kind of, I guess, two-part question. One is mentoring. The other one is, you know, when I was in youth group, my main mentor, I guess, was my youth minister. And even though it was a woman, and she was about 10 years older than, she wasn't real old, just about 10 years older, we could meet one-on-one. And it was good. Like, I was mentored that way. Do you ever meet one-on-one with students, or who do you see as fulfilling that role and that?
You know, that's an element sadly lacking for us, and I think that's due to some of the turnover in our student ministry. I do some of that as the kids need it. Do a lot of it passively, trying to you know, just kind of keep abreast of issues and needs, family situations and things, and and I'll go to a kid, catch them after rehearsal and say, just kind of whisper in there and say, listen, I'm just praying for you. Things are tough at home. If you need me, I'm here. And sometimes I get that. Sometimes I get a response. Sometimes I don't. But yeah, I wish we had more of that. We just don't at this point. Because I'm open to some ideas there. I wear 3 hats at church. Not only am I the minister of music, I'm also right now I do adult education and I do media. And so that kind of tells you some of the tough times we've had for the last 2 or 3 years. And so some of those things are suffering because there's not enough of me to go around and not enough staff to facilitate everything. But that's going to get better. And so some of the things that I would like to do don't get done because of that. And spending time, that outside of choir time with kids is one of the things that I'm just not able to keep up with. Yes, ma'am.
High school kids are notorious for creating a situation where this kid is unpopular for ridiculous reasons. If you have somebody that wants to be in the choir and nobody likes them, what do you do?
Well, that's a challenge. We had a young man who just graduated this year, who has been in and out of choir. And in fact, his little sister is in the choir. His name's Bobby. And Bobby is a challenging young man. He's prone to fits of anger. Prone to just some really strange behavior and things. And he was in the choir 2 or 3 years and traveled with us, and there were times I had to deal with those situations. And here's the way I deal with it with the kids. It may not be the right way, but here's the way I deal with it. Bobby is this, and Bobby is that, and he is this, and he is that. I understand that. But Bobby is also the Lord's, and he's ours. And we're going to love him. And that's how I deal with him. And I said, I expect you to love him. And I expect you to work at it. Yes, he angers me. Yes, I deal with that. And I'm honest with him when I have to deal with that stuff. But Bobby is the Lord's, and he's ours, and we're going to love him. And it goes right back to that. He's been the most challenging kid I've ever had. And he wasn't in choir this year because he spent time not only in public school, but he spent time institutionalized. And so he's that profound of behavior issues. But yeah, I mean that and I think that's places where you teach them and say, we love him. In our choir, he's one of the others, and so we have to pony up and do what we say we're going to do. At times, even when it's not comfortable. But yeah, I know what you're talking about, though. The unreasonable characterization of another student that can be difficult. Yeah, because I've had a couple of those too, that for whatever reason, the rest of the kids had just kind of didn't really care for. And sometimes those kids bring it on themselves. And in one of our cases, we had a kid who actually seemed to get pleasure out of alienating other kids. You may have had some of those somewhere along the way too, but there again, you kind of love them too. I wish I had a quick and easy fix, but sometimes just loving other people It's all I know to do, and it's messy. Sometimes it doesn't work out. I've actually lost kids and that's part of the heartache we talked about earlier this morning. Lost kids that you tried, but you just couldn't keep them because of situations of their own making, and parents. Yeah, I mean, that's just part of the heartache.
I had a very interesting situation this year. I had a little girl, 7th grade girl, that came into my choir that had obvious learning difficulties. Couldn't even find her own anthem. I mean, couldn't find whatever piece we were working on at the time. And was overwhelmed by a folder. And she's the oldest of 3 girls. The other 2 are functioning fine. But their mother came with her for a while and would try and help and would get stuff for her. And the little girl really didn't want her mother there. And I think she was embarrassed because there's her mother. They're in youth choir. And I saw the most phenomenal thing happen when one day her mother wasn't there, and some other girls surrounded her and helped her find everything and got everything that she needed and went and did things. But I think they're a little more used to that at school because of a lot of mainstreaming, that's happening. But I was really glad to see the kids do that, the other kids do that. And I think the mother relaxed at that point and knew, my child's not going to be sent off in the corner or pushed away and, and that kind of thing. And so.
Well, and the other thing, as far as community is concerned, for me, I have a responsibility for setting the tone of that community. But the ones who carry it out are the older kids who are the leaders, and it depends on those kids. If you have someone that they look up to that's counterproductive, then you've got to have a conversation. But if they look up to the other student leadership that they're there and they're committed, and it's going to be helpful. Fortunately, I've had good leaders. I've not really had to deal with one of those kids who was coming and had to be there and was being counterproductive.
I had 2 little boys this year too who were kind of feeding off each other and were inserting wrong words into the hymns, that had to do with various body parts. And, one of my adults was the heavy and went and did that. He talked to them first, and then I talked to the boys, and I said, boys, the next step is I'm going to talk to your mothers. And they came back. They kept coming back, and I think it worked out. They may have gotten more creative.
Well,
I don't know.
and this kind of brings up another point, is that whenever if we're building a choir, we're kind of in that not quite critical mass phase, we're afraid to do anything that might run them off.
Yeah.
And so we won't demand of them, or we won't discipline them lovingly when it needs to happen. And so, I mean, you got to be consistent for that to happen. And I don't mean that you're uncaring. What I mean is that if it's a situation that has to be dealt with, you've got to deal with it, rather than just letting it slide, because the other kids know what's going on. And if it slides with her, it's going to slide with me. And it's a slippery slope, and you're at the bottom of the hill, and they're all landing on you. So, I mean, that still goes to this question, love, because if I didn't love my kids, I wouldn't discipline my kids at home. And when I've got one boy on the back row, his name's Austin, and I mean, it's if we stop singing, he's talking, and I have to call him by name. Austin, I had to do it yesterday afternoon before you guys came in, when we were warming up. Austin, shut up. But Austin knows I love him, so I can do that. Of course, I'm probably going to be in trouble for saying shut up when I get home, because that's one of my wife's pet peeves. But I just, shut up, Austin, shut up. No, but we're going to this fall.
I'm thinking about it too, so I was wondering.
Yeah, this fall, we're gonna, that's it. I forget where, somewhere on choir tour. I forget what it was about, what we did. I had them take up all the cell phones. And the kids were going, no, not mom. I said, you're gonna get it back, come on. And we took them up for summers. I can't remember why.
Taken them up at camp before, and I've actually heard kids say, that was so nice.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, our camp, they don't let them have
For
them
a week.
either, so. But yeah,
But the
I'm gonna do
texting
something
is-
about, yeah, because they
It's
text and
nonstop.
they talk, and I'll say, put your cell phones away. And the next thing I know, when I'm, you know, they're texting and, that's what I'm doing. They look at me like, oh. So,
One of the things that, because we've just started letting cell phones be around. This year was the first year we did, and I sent a thing to the parents and them, and I just said that in our society, cell phones are just ubiquitous. I mean, they're just a part of life, but not required. It's a privilege if you're able to sit there with your cell phone when we're on a park tour. And so at any point, I'll take the cell phones, and I want the parents to know this. The only way you get it back is the parents make an appointment with me, and I have a very complicated schedule. So if they have to make an appointment with me, I even tell them I have a very complicated schedule in order to get your phone back. And that gives them pause for, like, if I say, are you texting behind that anthem? And then everyone in the room is like, oh my gosh, if he starts taking up cell phones, we're all dead, you know, because yeah, I think you have to.
well, and you've been at Talwood how long now, Randy?
29 years.
Yeah.
Kids.
Yeah.
Really bad kids.
And they reproduce.
They do. Yeah, it doesn't fall well.
Yeah, well, that's what,
He called them to the
I
office.
was eating lunch with John Purifoy Saturday at the Penders Conference, and he was telling me about the pastor at their church that's come to their church is a kid he had a youth choir at one time, and who challenged him at every turn. So anyway, they come back. They certainly do.
Question,
Yes, ma'am.
and I've covered this previously, but what do we do with kids who can't sing, can't carry a tune?
I let them be in choir. And the thing I will not say to a kid is just mouth the words. I will not do that. I don't care if the kid ruins a performance. I'm not gonna do that because I see too many men in my congregation
right.
who were told,
That's right.
don't sing.
That's right.
And I will not rob a child of that joy. I know, I just won't do it. And like I said earlier, I had two monotones of two boys on the front row on the right. Both had trouble. Now, they've come a long way this year. They've graduated up to singing the melody and octave low.
And that's an accomplishment.
Praise the Lord. They're gonna, aside from kids not knowing Christ as Savior, coming through choir, this other sad thing for me would be is that to see them when they're 25 years old standing in the congregation with their hands in their pockets, not singing. So,
I've had parents tell me that, well, the reason my child's not choir is that they can't sing. And I say, first of all, everybody can sing.
yeah,
Now, they may not have yet had the opportunity to connect their brain with their ear, with their vocal cords, which is what I do professionally. So I would bring, let me have them for a year. And I mean, and I'm sitting there going, the little voice inside of me, you're asking for someone to
Yeah.
yeah.
But I really do, and sometimes it's because I tell them the story of a guy named Trey who was what I would have said was a monotone, or couldn't sing at all. And he always auditioned for all the solos, and all the judges put the pencil down, and we just come on, Trey. But he came in one time and sang a solo, and he nailed it. He only could sing 5 notes, and that song happened to be his 5 notes. say, no, don't punish him, you really do. Yeah. But it's sometimes you just have to keep working with them. And by the time he was in high school choir, he was singing solos with the choir. So you have to, sometimes it's just a matter of connecting their brain with their vocal cords in their ear and getting it all, find where their monotone is and see if you can bang that note out on the piano and see if you can move away from around.
See if you can pull them away from it, yeah. Here's another thing that, this is just a pet peeve of mine. Volunteer choirs. I don't find the word volunteer in the New Testament anymore. Don't call them volunteers. They're not volunteers. We're not volunteers. Jesus told us to take up our cross and to follow him, and that's not volunteerism. Volunteers can come and go as they please. People who are called, and that's what I tell our kids. This is a calling. There's a difference between a calling and being volunteers. Jesus Christ calls us. The world volunteers. Volunteerism is for the Rotary Club. Volunteerism is for the Young Ladies Club, whatever, the Junior League. Jesus does not ask us to volunteer. And to me, we have a sign in my choir room that I think a lot of our people don't see much anymore. I'm about to move it again. But it's a little sign over the top of the door that just says called. C-A-L-L-E-D, called. Being called is a scriptural concept. Volunteerism is not. And so I shudder whenever I hear volunteer choir. I don't want volunteers. I want people who are called and are committed. And that's a huge difference. And kids will respond to that. They will respond to being called. They got enough things clamoring for their time to be volunteers and to do at school and all the other junk that unfortunately their parents try to heap on them, living vicariously through them, that they want something with substance, and being called is substantive. Substantive. I can't say it, I'm from Arkansas. So anyway, that's not part of the lecture or anything, that's just 2 cents, I'll put that in for free.
That's a good statement. Thanks.
Thank you. Other questions, ideas, things? Yeah, I mean, I know there's probably a song about it, but love is the key. I mean, it really shapes what we do. And that sometimes, I'm pretty demonstrative and physical anyway. That's easy for me. I don't mind hugging a kid. Now maybe we should talk about physical contact a little bit. That's something I've wrestled with a long time. What is appropriate physical contact for me to make with a student, and what is not appropriate? Only on the rarest occasions will I give one of my girls a full-on hug. I did that last night to those 3 senior girls. But I only did that because they know me. They've been in choir for 6 years. Their parents were there.
Right.
Okay. Most often it's one of these. And with a guy, it's occasionally one of these, but you know how guys are. But expressing that in a tangible, physical way, I think it's important that we all find a way to do that somehow. I got on Facebook 2 or 3 years ago just so I could keep up with the kids. Then it kind of took on a life of its own. Anybody who does that, you understand how that happens. But and then old girlfriends start popping up, and friends from high school. Anyway, but I watch Facebook and I look for them, and I'll just kind of like something they said. occasionally I've had to say, not on Facebook, but say, really? One of my girls, I had to have a conversation with her. Really? You're gonna say that on Facebook? Really? Did you think about that? So, anyway. But you can only do that. You can only do that kind of thing if they know you love them. Otherwise, they're gonna write you off and say, well, that's it. I'm not singing in the choir. I'm done with that. So,
We do the 3 H's at the end of rehearsal.
Uh-huh.
They have the opportunity to either handshake, hug, or a high five.
good. Well, one of the things that we do as part of our warm-up routine is massage and karate. I call it cheap massage, karate kid, and pat them down, you know, kind of pat their backs, kind of do all that stuff. And so that's how I include touch for them, is just by doing that, and that kind of plays a dual role. I'm loosening some up, and they're looking at me like, you know, new kids always go, you're crazy, you're warming up to sing? I mean, you're stretching out to sing? Yeah. You know, occasionally I'm tempted to say, I could explain to you, but you wouldn't get it. And I got a couple I could say that to. So, any other thoughts? Yes, sir.
Like your church, we've had a lot of turnover and not many youth coming, period, right now. So I'm barely keeping like a small ensemble. And I shared this year, I was home. But the girls that are in the ensemble all play on the same basketball team. So I go watch them. And even if I have to drive to one of the other small towns in the area, I go watch them. And they're good. They were whipping everything. So it was a lot of fun. And for the first couple of times I went, they were astounded. Why are you? I said, because I love it.
Makes a huge difference. When I was in Mississippi, that was a little easier for me to do. There was actually 2 high schools that kids went to, and so you know it's pretty. I mean, and the school was just down the street, from the church, and not far from the house. You know, I mean, pull out of the driveway and be at the school in 5 minutes and stuff. But in Tyler, I have kids from White House schools. I have kids from Tyler Independent School District. I have kids from Chapel Hill. I have kids from I don't have any this year, from band. I had one young man who was in the choir, came all the way through the choir from band. And then I have kids from Grace Community School, from the Brook Hill School, which is both private Christian schools in town. Kids from T.K. Gorman High School, which is the Catholic school in town. And so, I mean, it's a melting pot, and to try to go to many of those things is just next to impossible for me to do. I wish I could. But here's what I will do. If they tell me about it, I will try to go. And that's kind of what I'm told them. If you got something that's going on that's pretty cool, let me know. I'll try to come. And 2 of my kids one of the girls who just graduated, her name is Courtney, and she ran into Craig Courtney yesterday and had to have a picture with him because she sung some of Craig's music at school, which I was really impressed that she knew who Craig was, because I haven't put any Craig's stuff in front of him because I can't teach it to him yet. Or well, some of it I could, but anyway, so that was pretty cool. But she invited me to her choir concert, and so I went, and it was, you know, those are good things when you can do that. Of course, I go to my kids' stuff. You know, that's pretty easy duty. And I see a lot of our kids when I go to the high school stuff. But anything else? Well, love is the key. And I have to let God's word remind me of that periodically, so that I can do what I'm supposed to do. But can get them there in lots of different ways, perhaps, but you can only keep them if you love them. So, and you have to, and you have to give them something they can be proud of too. But loving them's the thing. Okay, thank you.